Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. Yesterday, Madam Finance Minister presented the Union Budget for the financial year 2026 and 27. Now, people on the social media, they were of the opinion that this budget was boring. People who were expecting government to announce some kind of tax concessions, other concessions, important policy measures, they were very unhappy after the announcement of the budget. So in our today's video, we'll try to understand, is the government budget boring by design, or is government budget, when it becomes boring, is it a good news or a bad news for Indian economy? So please stay tuned for this informative discussion. The notes which I will be using in our today's session, in case if you want to download them, you can go to a particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live and download them. And while you're at it, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel also. So let us start by understanding the context of our today's discussion. The context, as I told you, yesterday was a Sunday, and even then, Madam Finance Minister presented the budget for the next year. Now, while doing so, she presented her record 9th budget, and this was not the first time, but the second time when the Union budget was presented in the House of Parliament on a Sunday. The first one being in 1999, when then Finance Minister Mr. Yashwant Sinha presented the budget also on a Sunday. Now let us understand what a budget usually includes. Budget usually is an account of the government highlighting how much money it plans to earn in a year and eventually how much money it plans to spend in a year. Now this is not a discretion of the government that it is going to present budget every year. Rather, it is constitutionally mandated on the government according to Article 112 of the Constitution, and the Constitution itself does not mention the word budget. The Constitution in its Article 112 says that the Union budget is an annual financial statement presented by Government of India in the Parliament, and who presents this budget every year? It is presented by the Finance Minister. Now, many times you'll hear Madam Indira Gandhi and Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, when they were Prime Ministers, they also presented the budget. You need to understand, when they were the Prime Minister, at the time they presented the budget, they were also the in charge of Finance Ministry. So that is why sometimes when there is no specific appointed finance minister, it is usually the prime minister who presents the budget. But right now we have a full-time finance minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman. So she presents the budget every year. Now, a budget usually includes revenue estimates. Revenue estimates means the money that the government earns. Now, the government earns the money through tax revenue, which includes income tax, GST, corporate tax, customs duty, etc. And it also includes several non-tax revenues, which includes dividend from PSUs and RBI, fees that it levies on delivery of services, interest, disinvestment proceeds, etc. Similarly, government in its budgets also highlights the expenditure plans. What are government's revenue expenditure? Revenue expenditure usually means the expenditure that is made in day-to-day affairs of the government, like salaries, pensions, subsidies, interest payments, etc. Similarly, when government spends money for creation of assets, for developing infrastructural, for spending or procuring defense equipments, those are examples of capital expenditure. So every revenue, every expenditure needs to be mentioned in the year's budget. In addition to that, government also publishes important fiscal indicators. How much is the borrowing of the government in different accounts like fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, primary deficit, that is highlighted in the budget. Similarly, government have started focusing on highlighting its total debt with respect to GDP. Those figures are also published. Similarly, in addition to the government borrowings, where the government is borrowing the money from the market, from external market, from other institutions, those are also highlighted. In addition to important changes in the tax proposals, tax rates, slabs, exemptions, duty, cess, surcharge, and allocations that are made to different sectors. How much is the allocation made for defense, agriculture, infrastructure, education, health, welfare schemes, etc. All of them are highlighted in the budget. These are constitutional requirement of the budget. Under which article of the Constitution? Under Article 112 of the Constitution. Similarly, there are important policy measures that the government usually highlights, like day-to-day regulatory changes, administrative rules, sector-specific guidelines, and some important structural reforms announcement like labor laws, manufacturing policy, banking regulation, and trade policy shifts. Most importantly, you have to understand, these are not included in the budget. Why are they not included in the budget? Because to make these changes, the government does not need the approval of the parliament. So there are significant governance decisions like day-to-day policy making, like structural economic reforms. Those are usually, not all the time, usually not mentioned in the budget. Why not mentioned in the budget? Because to bring these changes in governance, government does not need the permission of the parliament, which it does for the budgetary approval. Right? Now let us understand why have the budgets become boring. Now, first of all, you need to understand in 2026, in modern era, the policy making is not a event-based policy making. Policy making throughout the year needs to be continuous. Now, this is very different from the times that happened before 30-40 years back, because earlier you can understand budget was a annual policy declaration. At that time, the government had imposed capital controls on Indian economy. The Indian economy was very literally integrated with other economies in the world, and even the information that were delivered to public were very limited. People used to get information through radio, through TVs, and through newspapers, right? So because of all these controls in the policy making in the Indian economy, the government had the liberty to announce each and everything in one go, usually, which happened at the time of the budget. But now in 2026, things have become very radically opposite. First of all, India right now is deeply integrated with the global economy. The world itself has become very globalized, and financial markets, the credit rating agencies, the investors themselves, they react to each and every policy decisions which the government makes. So as a result, government avoids making too many policy decisions from the budget, and it prefers usually to make decisions public in quick amount of time throughout the year. So this is one reason why you'll realize many important announcements are made even outside the budget, especially throughout the year and whenever the election is very near, because obviously you have to understand government is a political entity. Through these policy decisions, government would also want to maximize its reach within people, which automatically would result into electoral gains for the government. Similarly, you have to understand there are many electoral and federal realities. India is a federation. So in federation, many important policy decisions like labor laws, like industrial policy, that needs to be made by the union government, but only after consultation with the respective stakeholders. You have to consult industrial bodies, you have to consult labor groups, you have to consult with the state governments. So when consultation is required, usually the government avoids bringing these kind of policy decisions in the budget, because budgetary process is a very secretive process. So when you make budgets, the scope for consultation actually reduces. So government does not want to do that. Rather, by rolling these reforms individually, the government ensures that there is reduced confrontation on its policy measures, and the overall acceptance by other stakeholders also improve. Similarly, politically, by spacing these reforms, government ensures that its policy changes are absorbed improvely. Similarly, it allows for public to give feedback, and at the same time, taking into feedback, government can also ensure mid-course correction even after the budget has happened. Therefore, government, by bringing important policy reforms throughout the year, it signals predictability rather than a surprise, which would have happened in case all of these policy decisions were made public at the time of the budget. Right? Similarly, there is also, you need to understand these days, absence of drama and rhetoric. Budgets increasingly have become a technical statement that is given by the finance minister. It is not at all a political speech. So when it is a technical statement, those technical statements are filled with economic jargons. And usually you need to understand people have a general or on a comparison little understanding of economy as they have with respect to political aspects of the situation, right? Also, budget is prepared at a situation at a very tight fiscal constraints. For example, government made reforms in the GST regime last year in September, and because of these reforms in the GST regime, the government tax collection from GST reduced by 1.3 lakh crore. So that is why government now has a less policy space in order to give benefits to people in form of further tax cuts. Also, few years back in 2019, government made important changes in the corporate tax structure. This was also made outside the budget. It was made in September 2019. So when these corporate tax changes were made, less than 1/3 of total tax revenue comes from corporate, which was somewhat more before, when the government used to collect more corporate tax. Similarly, last year before the elections, government announced income tax hikes, right? Income tax concession. So because of these income tax concession, it usually expected to benefit middle class of the population. Now, if government were to announce tax hike right now, don't you think it would become politically and economically more unpopular, right? So that is why government did not make any kind of such announcements this year, because it has done so already last year. Similarly, you need to understand many people expect something in return whenever every new budget comes. Many people ask the question, what's new for me in this budget? Now, you need to understand the important reforms that I highlighted, the GST concession, the reduction of income tax liability, all of this happened last year itself. So that is why government did not have the space, government did not have the cushion to announce many such benefit this year. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for the government to earn money in order to spend it, right? So that is why this year's budget was a continuous budget, not a reform shock that the market and the general public expected. So that is why boring budget is not a sign of inaction. You need to understand, boring budget is a planned policy making activity which has become a year-round process, not just a one event process that was the budget 20-30 years before. And this is all because of the changes that we have happened in the information cycle, in the political cycle, and most importantly in the global economy's integration, that is globalization. Understood? Now let us find out, is bad budget or is a boring budget actually good for Indian economy? You need to understand, Indian economy right now is in a very predictable global environment. This predictable global environment is because of many factors. First is the ongoing geopolitical conflicts. Since the year 2023, you need to understand, Russia and Ukraine are involved in a war. Similarly, even in the regions of Middle East, that is from our perspective, West Asia is under tension because of the perspective conflict that can happen between Iran and the US, right? And because of all these geopolitical conflicts, there has happened a supply chain fragmentation. Supply chain fragmentation happened during the restrictions imposed by COVID-19 pandemic. It happens because of the tariff policy imposed by US President Donald Trump, and it is happening because of the ongoing global conflicts. And whenever ongoing global conflicts happen, whenever there is a, what you can say, hurdle to the global economy, the capital flows that actually benefits India, they become very volatile. And in that unpredictable global scenario, if you bring any kind of a surprise to your budget, it would send a very negative signal as far as Indian economy is concerned. And that is why there is a chance that if you make rapid announcements and if it is not taken well by the government, if it is not taken well by the economy, it would lead to further capital outflows out of the India. So in this kind of an unpredictable scenario, policy shocks are punished by the global markets. And what becomes important? What becomes a prerogative? The prerogative becomes predictability. So predictability that happens through a budget, that happens not bringing anything important in the budget, or that happens because of a boring budget, is rather not a compulsion for the government, rather it is a choice for the government. Because boring budget, it signals to other people that our economy stable in a volatile global economy. It signals that government has been able to control its borrowing cost. Government has been able to support long-term growth through investments, through infrastructure creation. And that is why government of India wants to signal what? Its fiscal credibility, that Indian economy, even in this volatile global environment, will be the world's largest major growing economy. Right? So it is becoming very important for the government that Indian economy remains stable, so that when government would want to borrow from other markets, its borrowing cost would remain stable. The global investors would look at Indian economy through a very positive signal with a ray of hope. And this is what the government wants to do by bringing a predictable budget. And this predictability usually people associated with boring budget, right? So in short, boring budget is good for economy. Now you can see the signs even in this year's budget. Government has chosen to remain on a path of fiscal consolidation. Government has chosen to be fiscally disciplined over what is known as populism, and there are key facts which show that. For example, government's every year borrowing is highlighted by the government's fiscal deficit. If you look at the fiscal deficit, it is growing marginally lower every year, so much so that it will be 4.3% of the GDP in the upcoming financial year, which is lower than the last financial year. Also, the interest payments that the government needs to pay for its past borrowing has constituted about 40% of center net revenue receipt. So if the government would borrow more, the interest payments also become higher, and naturally the other expenditures of the government would suffer. And that is what is highlighted by the debt to GDP ratio, which is also targeted to fall by the year 2031. So what does this fiscal consolidation by the government show? Government is trying to show that we are going to control our borrowings, and controlling our borrowings is very essential, because if you don't control your borrowings, if you give large tax cuts, it would mean higher borrowings in the future, and higher borrowings in the future would mean that the rate of interest in the Indian economy would be on a higher side, and this is a bad news for India's future growth prospects. So this is what the government is trying to signal to the market, that we are in a stable environment, we are not taking any populist measures, so that Indian economy stays on a right path even on the future. And to take care of the present growth requirement of the Indian economy, the government is focusing more on capital expenditure rather than distributing freebies. And this can also be understood by the capital expenditure requirements of the government. Government is now spending 14% of capital expenditure of its total spending, which was just about 14% before. Now it has become 23%. So out of the total 100 rupees that the government spends every year, 23 rupees is spent specifically for infrastructure creation, especially for procuration of new assets. And public capex of the government is nearly 3 times more than it was 10 years before. Now the government has improved its focus on creation of infrastructure, reducing the logistics cost, improving the energy requirements of the economy, and improving the connectivity between major cities, between smaller cities, and between rural areas through high-speed railway, through construction of new, improved, faster roads, national highways, expressway, like that. And this kind of a spending, you need to understand, whenever government increases its capital expenditure, this does not create instant headlines, because for the infrastructure to be created, it requires a longer time frame. Right? So all of this happens very slowly, and that is why people do not see this as an immediate freebie that they are getting otherwise. And this ultimately affects the long-term productivity of economy by improving it. So that is why boring budget, you can say, is good economics but bad for television. Now what you need to understand, this budget is a part and parcel of UPSC economy syllabus, and that is why I gave you important facts relating to this budget. To understand the bare basics of economy when it comes to budgetary process, when it comes or linking with polity and economy syllabus of the UPSC, you need to take admissions in the foundation batches. Right now we have started taking admissions in our February batch, which will start from 7th of February. To take admissions to these batch right now, and you should not lose out on important time, go to our website. There are options available for 2027 as well as for students who are looking to give exams in 2028. But before you make the payment, please remember, if you use this code ATS Live, you're going to get maximum discounts on not just this foundation batch courses, but also on optional subjects. So please keep that in mind. The batch starts few days from now, that is 7th of February. Now, before ending our today's discussion, there is an important question that appeared in 2016 exam, which relates to the budgeting process of Government of India. Please look at this question and do let me know the correct answers in the comment section. And I don't know about you guys, I in a way found the budget to be on the expected lines, but for some people it was boring. Did you feel the same? Please do let me know in the comment section. And the ones who are waiting to download the notes, you'll find it here on the channel ATS Live, which is the Telegram channel. And if you haven't subscribed to this YouTube channel where you're watching the video, or to this Telegram channel where you go and download the notes, please do not forget to subscribe them as well. This is all from my side. Please have a very good night. We'll see each other again tomorrow.